Hi everyone, it's Russell here from The Presenter. I hope you're well. This video is all about conversational presenting. So in 2018, conversational presenting has really taken off and people realise that there are huge benefits to be had by presenting in more of a conversational way. But I want to give you some tips today on how you can get your conversational presentations right every single time. So if you haven't tried it yet, some of the benefits for conversational presenting are, of course, you're going to save a lot of time, but mainly the biggest benefit you'll see is a massive increase in audience engagement. Right from the very start, you're able to ask your audience what they would like to focus in on. They can then do the driving and zoom into those areas whilst you facilitate the conversation. And that just leads to a much more natural feeling experience for you and the audience members. And of course, it keeps them engaged and it keeps their attention all the way through. It also saves a lot of time because they go to the areas that they want to focus in on, not the ones that you're trying to force them to look at by presenting in a traditional linear way. And also it takes the pressure off you as a presenter as well, because you don't have to remember a script word for word, line for line. That can put you under a lot of immense pressure when it comes to presenting, and presenting is scary enough as it is. So by allowing the conversation to just flow, you can have visual prompts on the screen and you'll know what you're going to talk about. You don't need to worry about following a script. So there's huge benefits to be had. What I want to explain to you today, though, are the do's and don'ts of conversational presenting. And what I want to focus in on is something that people are really overlooking when they decide to begin their journey towards conversational presenting and moving away from that traditional way of presenting. Now, the thing that I'm going to focus in on is really simple. Before I do that though, I just want to say thank you to Prezi for allowing me to deliver this webinar to you guys today. Really pleased to be here and glad that so many of you are on this call. And it kind of goes without saying, for those of you who use Prezi already will know this, but using Prezi as a presentation tool effectively means you are building a conversational presentation right from the get-go. Prezi is a conversational presentation tool and it makes being able to jump around from section to section very easy indeed. But the one thing I want to focus in on is something that a lot of people are really forgetting about, and that is of course the conversation. So a lot of people see either myself presenting in a conversational way, or they may be at an event and they see someone presenting in that way, and straight away they think, I want to present like that. That was such an engaging experience. So they either go to Prezi and set up a license, or they open up Prezi if they already are a user, and they start throwing content at their Prezi canvas. But there's a lot we need to do before that stage. So those are the areas that I want to take you through now. It's very simple, and we're going to focus in on three things, and those three things are, if we highlight them here on the screen, practice. Goes without saying, you need to practice your presentations. Exploring your conversations, we'll go into detail on that. And then the final stage is the actual build stage. So we're going to go through those three things, and there are a few tips, the do's and don'ts of each that I'm going to give you. And by the end of it, you should be in a really good position to build some really great conversations using the Prezi software. So let's get started. Practice first of all. So the one thing I will say is that just because we are all grown-ups and just because we all work in the business world, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are really good conversationalists. So I'm pretty sure you know what I mean, and I'm pretty sure you know of at least a handful of people in your life that are not good at holding conversations. They're maybe socially awkward, or they're not good listeners, or they speak too loudly when other people are speaking softly. There's a million different ways of being bad at conversations. So what you need to do before you try to present in this way is make sure you've mastered the art of conversation. And maybe not even mastered it, but just make sure that you are at a good level of conversation skills. So let's have a look, first of all, at my first tip, which is really, really simple. Do not assume that you are good at conversations. So unfortunately for me, I made that assumption, and I'll talk about that in a second. And do work on your weak points. So I'll give you the example I mentioned a second ago. So when I first decided to start presenting in a conversational way, I thought, well, I'm in my mid-30s, I must be good at conversations. But in fact, I found out that I was okay. I wasn't good, I was just okay. There were some weaknesses that I actually had to work on. So I actually asked some colleagues of mine at the time to have some conversations with me. We rehearsed the types of typical business conversations I was having with people when I was out selling our services, and I got them to grade me on different areas. And one of the things that I found, a really common reoccurrence in the grading that I was seeing, was that I got very excited in the conversations because I'm so passionate about what I do, and I was very quick to jump in with my point of view before the other person had finished talking. So that obviously was a little bit annoying for the other person or the other people in the conversation. So just be conscious of that. And I would definitely say it's a fun exercise to actually sit with some of your colleagues, maybe do a little role play, and get them to grade you on your conversation skills. Break it down into listening skills, questioning skills, patience. There's a lot of different areas that you could categorize as a good conversationalist. So break it down, ask them to grade you, and you'll find that there might be some interesting areas that you can work on. It's just like presentation skills. I would recommend that we work on those at least every 18 months or 24 months or so, and always continue to work on those. Same goes for conversation as well. Now, my second tip is to not be quiet throughout the whole presentation, but do not talk too much. Again, how many times have you been involved in a conversation with someone where you just can't get a word in edgeways? It's really, really frustrating, and you don't really feel like you're part of that conversation. What we want to do with conversational presenting is really make people feel like they are part of our conversation, that they are part of what's going on in the room. That's how we engage with them, and that's how we grab their attention, and that's how we keep their attention. So do not talk too much, and do listen more than you talk. So try to take a little bit of a step back in your conversations and just think about how much talking have you done, how much talking have they done, and try to listen more than you talk. The salespeople among us will be really good at this, and you'll know that the more listening you do, the better it will be for you, and it will help you uncover sales objections that you can later overcome in part of your conversational presentation. So my third tip here, aimed at the kind of art of conversation, is honesty and authenticity. So please do not try to be something you're not. We have a saying here in the UK which is blagging it, which is where you just try to get something done regardless. And a lot of people, sometimes mainly in the sales arena, try to blag their way through conversations. Now, people can obviously see right through you when you do this, so don't try to be something you're not, and do be yourself 100% and be completely honest and authentic. Now, that might feel a little bit uncomfortable for some people, because some people have been taught to maybe take on a different persona to try and battle their presentation nerves. So I'm going to kind of advise against that. And also another thing that might feel uncomfortable is if you don't know the answer to something, actually saying, I don't know, to the members of your audience. Now, they will appreciate you much, much more if you're completely honest and you admit that you don't know the answer to something, so long as you make a note of it and promise to follow up with that answer. Don't try to blag it, don't try to make it up, and don't be something you're not. And don't try to make out your business is something it's not either. Really, really important, and people can spot a BSer from a mile away, so just be careful of that. So when it comes to the art of conversation, do not assume that you're good at conversations just because you're a grown-up in the business world. Do not, just for a second think that you are the world's best conversationalist. We all have areas we need to work on. So do find those weak points by getting people to grade you in your conversations, or even record your conversations and play them back to yourself a bit later on. That's always a good thing to do as well. And do work on those weak points. The second area we looked at was do not talk too much and do listen more than you talk. Really, really important if you want to make people feel like they are part of the conversation, which of course they should be. And then last of all, in the art of conversation is do not try to be something you're not, and do be yourself, be honest, be authentic. If you don't know the answer to something, please just put your hand up and admit that. So once you've worked on those conversation skills, let's take a look at exploring our conversations a little bit more. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, and I did quite a lot of work on this when I first decided to start presenting in this way as part of tenders and sales pitches that I was doing to try and win new business for my company. So most of you watching this will know your subject matter off by heart. I know for a fact that I could probably deliver my sales presentation for our business standing on my head with my eyes closed because I've done it so many times. But every now and then, someone will throw a complete curveball question at you, and it will completely just stop you dead in your tracks. And then, bam, the flow of the conversation, the flow of the presentation is broken. You're there scratching your head because you don't know the answer. Obviously, think back to that original tip I gave you. Just be honest and admit you don't know the answer. But wouldn't it be nice if you could actually plan your conversations so that you had maybe not 100%, but at least 90 or 95% of the answers there in front of you, somewhere in your presentation? Well, there is a way that you can do that. Obviously, it takes a little bit of time, but it's all to do with just planning again. So be prepared for your conversation and do not assume that you know how things are going to flow. Even if you've done this presentation and you've had these kind of conversations a million times before, please don't assume that you know how things are going to flow, because as I just explained, someone out there, some smart aleck will think of a question that you've never heard before, and that can stop you dead in your tracks. So try to be as prepared as you can for every possible outcome. So how do you do that? Well, of course, it's really, really simple. I would record your conversations and map them out either on a piece of paper. If you work at a desk every day, have them in front of you on a whiteboard. So back in the day, I used to use Prezi Classic for actually mapping out the conversations I was having with people. But I couldn't do that until I had a bit of research behind me. So I asked a few people if I could record the conversations we were having. I think out of about 15 people, only 2 people said no to that, which is fair enough. But I explained to everyone else why I was doing it, and they were happy for me to make those recordings. What that then enabled me to do is map out every possible eventuality, every possible question, and every possible pain point that my customers or my prospects were having. So people in sales may be used to working in this way, but if you're not in sales and you just want to present in this conversational way, then this is going to be slightly new to you. So just grab a pen and paper, record your conversations, and then note down the reoccurring elements. So what are those main questions that keep coming up? What are those areas of content that you find yourself slipping into an awful lot? And what are some of the best responses that you give to those questions as well? What are the responses that people really like? And there may be different responses based on the different types of prospect or different types of audience member that you're presenting to. So depending on your subject matter, you could end up with a really complex flow chart of your conversation. But I recommend that you do this, and then of course, once you have that, you have the basis to then go and build your conversational Prezi, and that's what we're going to talk about next. So do not assume you know how things will flow, and do all you can to be prepared for every outcome. Now, when it comes to building your presentation, this is now, or it should be, very, very simple, because you've worked on your presentation skills, you feel confident that you are a good conversationalist. You've also now built up your plan or your map of your conversation. Now when we open Prezi, we should know exactly what we need to build. So the very first thing I want to mention is visuals. Now, how annoying is it when you're sat in the audience of a presentation and the presenter is talking at you and the rest of the room, and they then bring up a ton of bullet points onto the screen that you're also expected to read. Now, I don't know about you, but I cannot listen to someone very well whilst I'm also reading at the same time. So when it comes to conversational presentations, please do not force your audience to read anything at all whilst you're trying to have a conversation with them. It's hard enough to do that when you're just sat in the audience of a traditional linear flowing presentation. To do that in a conversational style presentation is extremely difficult. So please avoid that and do be extremely visual. Obviously being visual in presentations is important anyway, but I would say in a conversational presentation it's even more so, because you do need to make sure that you keep their attention. Their attention needs to be with you and not reading something off the screen. If you ask them to do that, they'll have to stop listening to you, and that's going to get a little bit annoying for them, and it will be difficult for you because you won't know if they've listened to what you just said or not. So just be really, really careful of that. My second tip here, and I need to add, when it comes to the Prezi build stage of this, I could probably talk all day long about this because there's a lot of different things that you can do here. But this is my biggest and probably the most important tip for building a conversational Prezi. And that's let them do the driving. And I'll explain what I mean. So when I first started delivering conversational presentations, I noticed straight away that my audience's attention levels just skyrocketed. It was really amazing to see, and that, of course, was when I decided this is how I want to present from now on. And then what I decided to do was try and take that a little step further, and I actually put my presentation in the hands of the audience. So I gave them my iPad. I had my iPad with my Prezi on it. I put that in front of them and I asked them to click through the presentation. Now, straight away, I saw my audience's attention and engagement skyrocket even further. People thought it was such an innovative way to deliver a presentation that they absolutely loved it. But whilst I would recommend you doing this, please don't run before you can walk, and do not expect people to know how to use Prezi. So if you do decide to go down that road and use an iPad, or even put your laptop in front of people so that they can click around the Prezi, do not expect them to know how to use Prezi. They may not be a Prezi user, they may have never even seen Prezi, so don't make any assumptions about that. What you should do though is add some navigation prompts for them. Of course, give them a little demo as well in person and show them how to double tap on the screen and move around and then zoom back out and things like that. But I would use icons like the one I have on the screen at the moment with the little hand, just with the kind of markers above it. That will indicate where people can tap to zoom in. So maybe use that on your topic covers, on your planet structures, whatever it may be inside your Prezi design. Also, another big benefit of that is that at the end of every presentation, people will probably ask you, can you send me those slides? So they are all thinking, of course, in the PowerPoint way of thinking. We can do something better than send them slides with Prezi. We can actually send them a link to an online version of the presentation, and we can add audio narration into that as well. And I would recommend you do that so that it does, again, make it easier for them to get really engaged and to know what they're doing. So they'll have the instructions on the screen, and they'll also be able to hear you talking in the version that you send across to them after your face-to-face presentation. So just to summarize quickly, we've gone through a lot of tips here on how to build good Prezi, conversational Prezis. Do not assume that you're good at conversations. We all know people who aren't, and they probably don't know it. Do work on your conversations and work on your weak points as well when they get highlighted to you. Don't talk too much, and do listen more than you talk. Do not try to be something that you are not, and be as honest and authentic as you can be. And then when it comes to actually planning your conversation, do not assume that you know how things are going to flow. You'll always get those curveball questions coming out of nowhere, and do all you can to be prepared for those. So record some of your conversations, play them back, map out your conversation on paper, on a whiteboard, use an app if you find that easier. It really doesn't matter, so long as you have some kind of conversation map that you can then take into your Prezi. And when you start to build that Prezi, don't force your audience to read, so don't add lots of text into your Prezi. Do be extremely visual. Do not expect people to know how to use Prezi, and add navigational prompts for them. And of course, give them a quick demo of how things work. So that's my top tips into how you can be a much better presenter by using conversational presenting as a technique. I hope you found it useful. There are lots and lots more tips that I would love to have shared with you on this video, but I don't want to make this a 2-hour-long episode. So please get back to me if there's anything you're still struggling with. You can contact me on Russell, RUSSELL @thepresenter.com or info@thepresenter.com, and check out our blog at thepresenter.com as well for lots more information and tips and tricks on how you can be a much better presenter. Take care.